think kinetic elements are important. We deal with kinetic elements every day. We open a door, we open a window. It's the place we actually touch the building. There's an architect, Johanni Palasma, which has a terrific quote. He says, when you touch a building, that's the handshake with the building. It's the most intimate connection you have with the building. So if you recognize that, then you should make it a very special event rather than just a functional event. I'm Tom Kundig, owner of Olson Kundig Architects, designer of the Maxon residence. I built the house for the Maxon family, just a terrific family, Lou and Kim and their 3 boys. The creative relationship between Lou and I was almost like colleagues. Lou comes with a design background, and so for us, it was a conversation, frankly, about what he was thinking, what I could bring to the table. The architectural style at its root is modernism. And what I mean by modernism is it's a rational building style. It's more than style, it's almost like a value. Is how do you make a building efficient and deliver it in a package that is also beautiful? So form follows function, beauty follows function. In my mind, that's the definition of modernism. Originally, the speculation of the idea that you could move a part of the house happened on a project maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where we were working on a project that had one particular family member that the rest of the family really didn't want to deal with. And we were just laughing about it as, wouldn't it be great if you could push a button and send that bedroom off into the other end of the property? But what I did was I brought it back to the office, and our gizmologist, Phil Turner, who's frankly a genius, we talked about it. And so he built a little model of a cog. It wasn't proven because it wasn't built, but Phil, with his background, felt that absolutely it was possible. And so the conversation with Lou was, this is efficient family house. It's all about the chaos. It's all about how do you raise a family? Well, this particular house is a relatively small house, so it's really hard to get away from that kind of life. But Lou wanted to remain on site. He wanted to be with the family. It was a conversation about maybe he could commute into the woods, from this house. I'm here with Lou Maxon at the entry to the Maxon property. This is where the gate is, and it sets the spirit of the house, and it's intentionally very straight, orthogonal, and geometric as a counterpoint to the beauty of the forest, of course, and the mottled light, the speckled light that's coming through the forest. As you come into the property, you don't see the house at this point, but as you come around the corner, you begin to get a little glimpse of the house as it reveals itself in this landscape. So this sort of chicane road, which is called a shifted axis, it's very important in a Japanese garden where you can't see where you're going, but as you come around the corner, it reveals where you're going ultimately. You'll notice the house kind of levitates or floats off the ground, and the ground is allowed to go underneath the house. So the idea is to float this building kind of gently off the ground so that it takes that mid-story between the upper forest and the low story. So there's a ramp that is taking you from that sort of ground level to that elevated level at the entry door. The exterior of the house is formed in a very simple shape to sort of almost be the yin to the yang of the natural landscape. But it's also made out of a tough material that's allowed to weather. Ideally, the building gets better with time rather than it's great at the beginning and then it begins to deteriorate. It's also the colors fit in with some of the colors of the bark, some of the colors of the landscape beyond. It's intended to sort of disappear into the landscape. This is actually a good example of what we sometimes call anomalies. And these are, like in the wabi-sabi tradition, an accident is a good thing because it gives sort of a humanity next layer to the project. And actually, I just love the way that kind of like connects all the way through. The entry door, it's intentionally large into a relatively smaller, more modest house for the big welcome into the family's home. This is a good example of balanced light. In the Pacific Northwest, we have actually a large percentage of cloudy skies, so you want to harvest as much light as possible, but you also want to balance the light. The glass is floor to ceiling, so as much as possible, it's opening to the view and to the light, but also it's on the part of the building that's basically cantilevered above the ground. So the idea is it feels like you float above the ground, so there's a little bit of a different, almost magical sort of moment when you come into this space. You feel like you're hovering. And I think it makes perfect sense that you want to just be able to sort of tell the story about the materials and the relationship between the rails, the wheels, and then the building itself. Lou was able to find these rails that were built pre-1910 in
Bethlehem steel.
This is perfectly level because obviously you can't have your car in any way sort of shift around. You'll probably also see the sort of tall proportions, the reasons for the windows being elongated. It's not just as a reference to the relatively long proportions of the building itself, but it's also intentionally picking up all of the more vertical proportions of the forest here in the Pacific Northwest. We talked about this yellow door. Maybe instinct was on our part that it would be yellow, but really for Lou, this yellow is much more important from his research into what yellow means in the railroad industry. Warning signs, Burlington Northern, graphics. This has actually got an interesting history behind it.
Yeah, this is an original Great Northern switch stand that they would use to switch the trains off the tracks. So everything in the project that we found artifact-wise had to be connected to railways that would have served the community here or in the greater Pacific Northwest. And we sort of brought back to life some of these artifacts. This is the original lantern that would designate when the trains were coming. This would have been full of kerosene, but we've sort of hacked it to work with LED lights today. The lights actually do come on or will blink, and so when I'm working and the light's on, someone knows that I'm in here and not to be bothered. Once the possibility became a reality that we could actually collaborate and figure out how to have my studio run on actual railroad tracks, that's really where I sort of look back almost in a nostalgic way to like growing up and loving trains, having a train set. That really reinvigorated my passion for trains. And it also sort of connected me to the history of Carnation and the railroading here. One of the key pieces of the project was figuring out how we're going to actually operate the rail car. And through some connections I made with actual folks that work for the railroad, they pointed me to this, which is basically a locomotive control panel which runs even today on diesel and electric locomotives. So we were able to actually acquire this and then have our fabrication team sort of hack it to work with our electric motor system. So basically it all starts with this brass key, and once the key is put into the locomotive control, the key actually becomes the way that you motorize the studio. So we're at the end of the track now, but to point back towards the house, the Home Depot, we go here, and then the studio starts moving. We can actually change the speed of the car. If we want to go slow back home, or if you're in a hurry to get home for dinner, you just slide the locomotive control and we pick up speed.
Thinking and dreaming. I think this is something kind of interesting, is Lou's got our model of the house with the office,
which moves on a little magnet.
Was noticing that there's a Lego model up here that Lou or one of your kids possibly built. So I think, these proofing models are some of the most important design tools we can work with. And this is elevating off the ground just for a little bit more of a peaceful, quiet, in the clouds kind of position off the level where the chaos is with the family. So, super important view, a quiet view, a meditative view. The architecture is intentionally, or should be, intentionally responding to the idiosyncratic nature of the situation, the client or the climate or whatever. And as you begin to understand those idiosyncratic situations, you begin to use all the tools on your belt to basically come up with a route or come up with a solution. And sometimes that leads into invention. And of course, that's a very exciting moment when that happens, but you don't go into it, I don't think, looking for an invention or a new idea. It's like a musician that's really skilled at a piece, they'll always modify them because they're interested in it. It's like Bob Dylan. He's not going to play Tangled Up in Blue the same every time he does it. He's always going to be sort of twisting it into sort of a different way. That's a true creative. And hopefully that's what architects do. Yes, you may have done it before. We've certainly done roofs. We've certainly done foundations and walls. And if you're really skilled and you really know those issues, then you can actually, it's like a jazz musician. I would argue that most jazz combos don't play the same piece the same every time they play it because they're always in conversation. Biggest thing I took away from this house was friends. And you always hope that's the case with these projects, is that you remain friends, and typically we do. I think to be an architect is one of the biggest privileges we can have, because literally you are involved in a community, worldwide community, and you are in a trusted position to interpret what the community is thinking, in a sense, and giving something back to the community. We're not in a life-saving situation, but we're in a life-changing situation. And what a privilege to be trusted with that agenda.